and I'm a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. Today, my guest is Dr. Lex Fridman. Dr. Lex Fridman is an expert in electrical and computer engineering, artificial intelligence, and robotics. He is also the host of the Lex Fridman podcast, which initially started as a podcast focused on technology and science of various kinds, including computer science and physics, but rapidly evolved to include guests and other topics as a matter of focus, including sport. For instance, Dr. Lex Fridman is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's had numerous guests on who come from the fields of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, both from the coaching side and from the competitor side. He also has shown an active interest in topics such as chess and essentially anything that involves intense activation and engagement of the mind and or body. In fact, the Lex Fridman podcast has evolved to take on very difficult topics such as mental health. He's had various psychiatrists and other guests on that relate to mental health and mental illness, as well as guests focused on geopolitics and some of the more controversial issues that face our times. He's had comedians, he's had scientists, he's had friends, he's had enemies on his podcast. Lex has a phenomenal, I would say a 1 in an 8 billion ability to find these people, make them comfortable, and in that comfort, both try to understand them and to confront them and to push them so that we all learn. All of which is to say that Lex Fridman is no longer just an accomplished scientist. He certainly is that, but he has also become one of the more preeminent thought leaders on the planet. And if there's anything that really captures the essence of Lex Fridman, it's his love of learning, his desire to share with us the human experience and to broaden that experience so that we all may benefit. In many ways, our discussion during today's episode captures the many facets of Lex Fridman, although no conversation, of course, could capture them all. We sit down to the conversation just days after Lex returned from Ukraine, where he deliberately placed himself into the tension of that environment in order to understand the geopolitics of the region and to understand exactly what was happening at the level of the ground and the people there. You may notice that he carries quite a lot of both emotion and knowledge and understanding, and yet in a very classic Lex Fridman way, you'll notice that he's able to zoom out of his own experience around any number of different topics and view them through a variety of lenses so that first of all, everyone feel included, but most of all, so that everyone learns something new, that is, to gain new perspective. Our discussion also ventures into the waters of social media and how that landscape is changing the way that science and technology are communicated. We also get into the topics of motivation, drive, and purpose, both finding it and executing on that drive and purpose. I should mention that this is episode 100 of the Huberman Lab podcast, and I would be remiss if I did not tell you that there would be no Huberman Lab podcast were it not for Lex Fridman. I was a fan of the Lex Fridman podcast long before I was ever invited on to the podcast as a guest. And after our first recording, Lex was the one that suggested that I start a podcast. He only gave me 2 pieces of advice. The first piece of advice was start a podcast. And the second piece of advice was that I not just make it me blabbing into the microphone and staring at the camera. So I can safely say that I at least followed half of his advice, and that I am ever grateful for Lex, both as a friend, a colleague in science, and now fellow podcaster for making the suggestion that we start this podcast. I already mentioned a few of the topics covered on today's podcast, but I can assure you that there is far more to the person that many of us know as Lex Fridman. If you are somebody interested in artificial intelligence, engineering, or robotics, today's discussion is most certainly for you. And if you are not, but you are somebody who is interested in world politics and, more importantly, the human experience, both the individual and the collective human experience, Lex shares what can only be described as incredible insights into what he views as the human experience and what is optimal in order to derive from our time on this planet. Before we begin, I'd like to emphasize that this podcast is separate from my teaching and research roles at Stanford. It is, however, part of my desire and effort to bring zero cost to consumer information about science and science-related tools to the general public. In keeping with that theme, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's podcast. Our first sponsor is Element. Element is an electrolyte drink with everything you need and nothing you don't. That means the electrolytes, sodium, potassium, and magnesium, are in Element in the correct ratios, but it has no sugar. As I mentioned before on the podcast, electrolytes are critical to the function of every cell in the body, and especially the cells in your brain, meaning the neurons or nerve cells. Indeed, the ability for nerve cells to be active and communicate with one another critically depends on sodium, potassium, and magnesium. You can get electrolytes from a variety of sources, but it's often hard to get them in the proper ratios, even from food. So if you're somebody who's exercising a lot and sweating, or if you're somebody following, for instance, a low carbohydrate or even a semi-low carbohydrate diet, that will cause you to excrete electrolytes. I tend to have my element first thing in the morning when I wake up, or within the first few hours of waking, anytime while or after I'm exercising or I've sweat a lot, such as exiting the sauna. If you'd like to try Element, you can go to Drink Element, that's lmnt.com/Huberman, to claim a free Element sample pack with your purchase. Again, that's Drink Element, lmnt.com/Huberman, to claim a free sample pack. Today's episode is also brought to us by Levels. Levels is a program that lets you see how different foods affect your health by giving you real-time feedback on your diet using a continuous glucose monitor. Now, blood glucose, or blood sugar, is a critical aspect of your immediate and long-term health, and indeed your feelings of vigor and mental clarity and well-being at any moment. One of the key things is to know how different foods and food combinations and timing of food intake is impacting blood glucose. And with Levels, you're able to assess all of that in real time. I tried Levels, and what it taught me, for instance, was that I can eat certain foods at certain times of day, but if I eat them at other times of day, I get a blood sugar crash. It also taught me, for instance, how to space my exercise and my food intake. Turns out for me, exercising fasted is far more beneficial. That's something I learned using Levels, and it's completely transformed not just the spacing and timing of my diet and exercise, but also use of things like the sauna and other activities. It's been a tremendous learning for me that's really shaped an enormous number of factors in my life that have led to me feeling far more vigorous, with far more mental focus and physical strength and endurance. So if you're interested in learning more about Levels and trying a continuous glucose monitor yourself, go to levels.link/Huberman. Again, that's levels.link, LINK/Huberman. Today's episode is also brought to us by 8 Sleep. 8 Sleep makes smart mattress covers with cooling, heating, and sleep tracking capacity. I've talked many times on this podcast about the critical relationship between sleep and body temperature. That is, in order to fall asleep and stay deeply asleep throughout the night, our body temperature needs to drop by about 1 to 3 degrees. And conversely, when we wake up in the morning, that is in large part because of our body heating up by 1 to 3 degrees. Now, people have different core body temperatures, and they tend to run colder or hotter throughout the night. 8 Sleep allows you to adjust the temperature of your sleeping environment so that you have the optimal temperature that gets you the best night's sleep. I started sleeping on an 8 Sleep mattress cover about 8 months ago, and it has completely transformed my sleep. I sleep so much deeper. I wake up far less during the middle of the night, if at all, and I wake up feeling far better than I ever have, even after the same amount of sleep. If you want to try 8 Sleep, you can go to 8sleep.com/Huberman to save up to $400 off their Sleep Fit Holiday Bundle, which includes their new Pod 3 cover. 8 Sleep currently ships in the USA, Canada, United Kingdom, select countries in the EU, and Australia. Again, that's 8sleep.com/Huberman. And now for my discussion with Dr. Lex Fridman. Welcome back.
It's good to be back in a bedroom. This feels like a porn set. I apologize to open that way. I've never been on a porn set, so I should admit this.
Our studio is being renovated, so here we are for the monumental recording of episode 100.
Episode 100.
Of the Huberman Lab podcast, which was inspired by the Lex Fridman podcast. Some people already know this story, but I'll repeat it again for those that don't. There would not be a Huberman Lab podcast were it not for Lex Fridman, because after recording as a guest on his podcast a few years ago, he made the suggestion that I start a podcast, and he explained to me how it works. And he said, you should start a podcast, but just make sure that it's not you blabbing the whole time, Andrew. And I only sort of followed the advice.
Yeah, well, you surprised me, surprised the world that you're able to talk for hours and cite some of the best science going on and be able to give people advice without many interruptions or edits or any of that. I mean, that takes an incredible amount of skill that you're probably born with, and some of it is developed. I mean, the whole science community is proud of you, man. Stanford is proud of you. So, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It was really surprising because it's unclear how a scientist can do a great podcast that's not just shooting the shit about random stuff, but really is giving very structured, good advice that's boiling down the state-of-the-art science into something that's actually useful for people. So that was impressive. It's like, holy shit, he actually pulled this off. And doing it every week. on a different topic. That, I mean, you know, I'm usually positive, especially for people I love and support. But damn, I thought there's no way he's going to be able to pull this off week after week. And it's been only getting better and better and better. I had a whole rant on a recent podcast, I forget with who, of how awesome you are, with Rana El-Kaloubi. She's a emotion recognition person, AI person. And then she didn't know who you were. And I was like, what the hell do you mean? You don't? And then I just went on this whole rant of how awesome you are. It was hilarious.
Oh, well, I'm very gratified to hear this. It's a little uncomfortable for me to hear, but listen, I'm just really happy if people are getting information that they like and can make actionable. And it was inspired by you. And look, right back at you. I've followed a number of your structural formats, attire. I don't wear a tie. I'm constantly reminded about this by my father, who says, "What he saw my podcast and was like, why don't you dress properly like your friend Lex?" He literally said that. And it's a debate that goes back and forth, but nonetheless.
How does it feel? Episode 100. How does it feel?
You know, I think.
Can you imagine you're here? You're here after so many episodes and done so much. I mean, the number of hours is just insane. The amount of passion, the amount of work you put into this. What's it feel like?
It feels great. And it feels very much like the horizon is still at the same distance in front of me. You know, every episode I just try and get information there, and the process we talked about on your podcast, so we won't go into it, of collecting information, distilling it down to some simple notes, walking around, listening to music, trying to, figure out what the motifs are. And then, as just like you, I don't use a teleprompter or anything like that. There's very minimal notes. So it feels great and I love it. And again, I'm just grateful to you for inspiring it. And I just want to keep going and do more of it. And I should say, I am also relieved that we're sitting here, because you recently went overseas to a very intense war zone, literally, to the Ukraine. And the entire time that you were there, I was genuinely concerned. The world's a unpredictable place in general, and we don't always get the only vote in what happens to us. So first of all, welcome back safely, one piece, one alive piece. And what was that like? I mean, at a broad level, at a specific level, what drew you there? What surprised you? And how do you think it changed you in coming back here?
I think there's a lot to say, but first, it is really good to be back. One of the things that when you go to a difficult part of the world, or a part of the world that's going through something difficult, you really appreciate how great it is to be an American. Everything, the easy access to food, despite what people think, the stable, reliable rule of law, the lack of corruption in that you can trust that if you start a business or if you take on various pursuits in life, that there's not going to be at scale manipulation of your efforts such that you can't succeed. So that this kind of, capitalism in its the ideal of capitalism is really still burning bright in this country, and it really makes you appreciate those aspects. And also just the ability to have a home for generations, across generations. So you can have your grandfather live in, Kentucky in a certain city, and then his children live there, and you live there, and then it just continues on and on. That's the kind of thing you can have when you don't have war, because war destroys entire communities. It destroys histories, generations, like life stories that stretch across the generations.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that until you said just now, but photographs, hard drives get destroyed or just abandoned, right? Yeah. Libraries. Nowadays things exist in the cloud, but there's still a lot of material goods that have, are irreplaceable, right?
Well, even, in rural parts of the United States, they don't exist in the cloud, right? A lot of people still, even in towns, they still love the physical photo album of your family. A lot of people still store their photographs of families in the VHS tapes and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, but I think there's so many things I've learned and really felt the lessons. One of which is nobody gives a damn when your photos are gone and all that kind of stuff, your house is gone. The thing time and time again I saw for people that lost everything is how happy they are for the people they love, the friends, the family that are still alive. That's the only thing they talk about. That, in fact, they don't mention actually with much dramatic sort of vigor about the trauma of losing your home. They're just nonstop saying how lucky they are that person X, person Y is still here. And that makes you realize that when you lose everything, it makes you realize what really matters, which is the people in your life. I mean, a lot of people kind of realize that later in life when you're facing mortality, when you're facing your death, or you get a cancer diagnosis, that kind of stuff. I think people here in America, in California, with the fires, you can still lose your home. You realize it doesn't really matter. It's a pain in the ass, but what matters is still the family, the people, and so on. I think the most intense thing, I talked to several hundred people, some of which is recorded. I've really been struggling to put that out because I have to edit it myself. And so you're talking about 30, 40 hours of footage. And it
is emotionally struggling.
Yeah,
it's emotional struggle.
It's extremely difficult. So I talked to a lot of politicians, the number 2 in the country, number 3. I'll be back there to talk to the president, to do a 3-hour conversation. Those are easy to edit. They're really heartfelt and thoughtful folks from different perspectives on the geopolitics of the war. But the ones that are really hard to edit is like grandmas that are like in the middle of nowhere. They lost everything. They still have hope. They still have love. And many of them, unfortunately, have now hate in their heart. So in February, when Russia invaded Ukraine, this is the thing I realized about war. One of the most painful lessons is that war creates generational hate. We sometimes think about war as a thing that kills people, kills civilians, kills soldiers, takes away lives, injures people, but we don't directly think about the secondary and tertiary effects of that, which last decades, which is anyone who's lost a father or a mother or a daughter or a son, they now hate not just the individual soldiers or the leaders that invaded their country, but the entirety of the people. So it's not that they hate Vladimir Putin or hate the Russian military, they hate Russian people. So that tears the fabric of a thing that, for me, my half my family is from Ukraine, half my family is from Russia. But I remember the pain, the triumph of World War II still resonates through my entire family tree. And so you remember when the Russians and Ukrainians fought together against this Nazi invasion. You remember a lot of that. And now to see the fabric of this people's torn apart completely with hate is really, really difficult for me, just to realize that things will just never be the same on this particular cultural, historical aspect. But also, there's so many painful ways in which things will never be the same, which is we've seen that it's possible to have a major hot war in the 21st century. I think a lot of people are watching this. China is watching this. India is watching this. United States is watching this and thinking, we can actually have a large-scale war. And I think the lessons learned from that might be the kind that lead to a major World War III in the 21st century. So like one of the things I realized watching the whole scene is that we don't know shit about what's going to happen in the 21st century. And we kind of have this intuition, like surely there's not going to be another war.
Like we'll just coast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, pandemic. Yeah.
Back to normal.
Back to normal.
Whatever that is.
But you have to remember, at the end of World War I, as Woodrow Wilson called it, the war to end all wars, nobody, ironically, in a dark way, it was also the Roaring '20s when people believed this. There will never be another world war. And 20 years after that, the rise of Nazi Germany, a charismatic leader that captivated the minds of millions and built up a military that can take on the whole world. And so it makes you realize that this is still possible. This is still possible. And then the tension, you see the media machine, the propaganda machine that I've gotten to see every aspect of, it's still fueling that division between America and China, between Russia and India. And then Africa has a complicated thing that's trying to figure out who are they with, who are they against. And just this tension is building and building. And like, it makes you realize, like, the thing that might shake human civilization may not be so far off. That's a realization you get to really feel. I mean, there's all kinds of other lessons, and one of which is propaganda. Is I get a lot of letters, emails, and some of them are full of really intense language, full of hate from every side
Toward
me. The hate is towards me as representing side X, and X stands as a variable for every side. So either I'm a Zelensky show, or I'm a Putin show, or I'm a NATO show, or I'm an America show, American Empire show, or I'm a Democrat or a Republican, because it's already been in this country politicized. I think there's a sense of Ukraine is this place that's full of corruption. Why are we sending money there? I think that's kind of the messaging on the Republican side. On the Democratic side, I'm not even keeping track of the actual messaging and the conspiracy theories and the narratives, but the tension is there, and I get to feel it directly. And what you get to really experience is there's a large number of narratives that all are extremely confident in themselves that they know the truth. People are convinced, first of all, that they're not being lied to. People in Russia think there's no propaganda. They think that yes, there's like state-sponsored propaganda, but we're all smart enough to ignore the sort of lame propaganda that's everywhere. They know that we can think on our own. We know the truth, and everybody kind of speaks in this way. Everybody in the United States says, well, yes, there's mainstream media. They're full of messaging and propaganda, but we're smart. We can think on our own. Of course, we see through that. Everybody says this, and then the conclusion of their thought is often hatred towards some group, whatever that group is. And the more you've lost, the more intense the feeling of hatred. It's a really difficult field to walk through calmly and with an open mind and try to understand what's really going on.
It's super intense. Those are the only words that come to mind as I hear this. You mentioned something that it seems that hate generalizes. You know, it's against an entire group or an entire country. Why do you think it is that hate generalizes and that love may or may not generalize?
I've had, so one of the, as you can imagine, the kind of question I asked is, do you have love or hate in your heart? It's a question I asked almost everybody. And then I would dig into this exact question that you're asking. I think some of the most beautiful things I've heard, which is people that are full of hate are able to self-introspect about it. They know they shouldn't feel it, but they can't help it. It's not, they know that ultimately the thing that helps them and helps everyone is to feel love for fellow man, but they can't help it. They know it's like a drug. They say like hate escalates. It's like a vicious spiral. You just can't help it. And the question I also asked is, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Russia? And after much thought, almost, it's split, but most people will say no. I will never be able to forgive.
And because of the generalization you talked about earlier, that could even include all Russians. Statements, they mean all Russians.
Because if you do nothing, that's as bad or worse than being part of the army that invades. So the people that are just sitting there, the good Germans, the people that are just quietly going on with their lives, you're just as bad, if not worse, is their perspective.
Earlier, you said that going over to the Ukraine now allowed you to realize just so many of the positives of being here in the United States. I have a good friend. We both know him. I won't name him by name, but we've communicated, the three of us, from Tier 1 Special Operations. He spent years doing deployments, really amazing individual. And I remember when the pandemic hit, he said on a text thread, Americans aren't used to the government interfering with their plans. Around the world, many people are familiar with governments dramatically interfering with their plans, sometimes even in a seemingly random way. Here, we were not braced for that. We get speeding tickets and there's, lines to vote and things like that. But I think the pandemic was one of the first times, at least in my life, that I can remember, where it really seemed like the government was impeding what people naturally wanted to do. And that was a shock for people here. And I have what might seem like a somewhat mundane question, but it's something that I saw on social media. A lot of people were asking me to ask you, and I was curious about too. What was a typical day like over there? Were you sleeping in a bed? Were you sleeping on the ground? Everyone seems to want to know, what were you eating? Were you eating once a day? Were you eating your steak? Or were you in fairly deprived conditions over there? I saw a couple photos that you posted with out of doors in front of rubble, with pith helmet on in one case. What was a typical day like over there?
So there's two modes. One of them, I spent a lot of time in Kiev, which is much safer than, it may be obvious to state, but for people who don't know, it's in the middle of the country and it's much safer than the actual front, where the battle is happening. So the much safer than Kiev even is Lviv, which is the western part of the country. So the times I spent in Kiev were fundamentally different than the time I spent at the front. And I went to the Kherson region, which is where a lot of really heated battle was happening. There's several areas. So there's Kharkiv, it's in the northeast of the country. And then there's Donbass region, which is east of the country. And then there's Kherson region, which, by the way, I'm not good at geography, so is the southeast of the country. And that's where, at least when I was there, was a lot of really heated fighting happening. So when I was in the Kherson region, there's, it's what you would imagine. The place I stayed at a hotel where all the lights have to stay off. So the entire town, all the lights are off. You have to kind of navigate through the darkness and then use your phone to shine and so on.
This is terrible for the circadian system.
Yeah, that's exactly always this. How can I do this? Where's my element and athletic greens? How can I function? No. So there's, I think it was balanced by the deep appreciation of being alive.
Right. No, I mean, this is the reason I asked. This is the reason I ask is, we get used to all these creature comforts.
Yes.
And we don't need them, but we often come to depend on them in a way that makes us feel like we need them.
Yeah, but very quickly, there's something about the intensity of life that you see in people's eyes because they're living through war that makes you forget all those creature comforts. And it was actually, I'm somebody who hates traveling and so on. I love the creature habits. I love the comfort of the ritual, right? But all of that was forgotten very quickly. Just the intensity of feeling, the intensity of love that people have for each other. That was obvious. In terms of food, so there's a curfew. So depends on what part of the country, but usually you basically have to scamper home at like 9 p.m. So the hard curfew in a lot of places is 11 p.m. at night, but by then you have to be home. So in some places it's 10. So at 9 p.m. you start going home, which for me was kind of wonderful also because I get to spend, I get to be forced to spend time alone and think for many hours in wherever I'm staying, which is really nice. And there's a calmness and a quietness to the whole thing. In terms of food, once a day, the food is incredibly cheap and incredibly delicious. People are still, one of the things they can still take pride in is making the best possible food they can. So meat, but they do admire American meat, so the meat is not as great as it could be in that country. But I ate borscht every day, all that kind of stuff. Mostly meat. So spend the entire day, wake up in the morning with coffee, spend the entire day talking to people, which for me is very difficult because of the intensity of the stories, one after the other. We just talk to regular people, talk to soldiers, talk to politicians, all kinds of soldiers. I talk to people there who are doing rescue missions, so Americans. I hung out with Tim Kennedy.
Oh, yeah. The great Tim Kennedy.
The great Tim Kennedy, who also, him and many others, revealed to me one of the many reasons I'm proud to be an American is how trained and skilled and effective American soldiers are.
I guess for listeners of this podcast, maybe we should familiarize them with who Tim Kennedy is, because I realize that a number of them will know.
How do you do that? How do you try to summarize a man?
Right. Let's say we can be accurate but not exhaustive, as any good data are accurate but not exhaustive. Very skilled and accomplished MMA fighter, very skilled and accomplished former special operations. Remember, American patriot and podcaster too, right? Does he have his own podcast?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
We know Andy Stumpf has his own podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's an amazing podcast. Yeah. Andy's great.
Yeah. Clearing Hot podcast with Andy Stumpf.
But also
podcast.
Tim Kennedy's like the embodiment of America to the most beautiful and the most ridiculous degree. So he's like, would you imagine, what is it, Team America? That like, I just imagine him like shirtless on a tank rolling into enemy territory, just screaming at the top of his lungs. That's just his personality.
But not posturing. That's it. He actually does the work, as they say.
So this is the thing. He really embodies that. Mm-hmm. Now, some of that is just his personality and humor. I'd like to sort of comment on the humor of things, not just with him. It's one other interesting thing I've learned. But also when he's actually helping people, he's extremely good at what he does, which is building teams that rescue, that go into the most dangerous areas of Ukraine, dangerous areas anywhere else, and they get the job done. And like one of the things I heard time and time again, which really interesting to me, that Ukrainian soldiers said that, comparing Ukrainian, Russian, and American soldiers are the bravest, which was very interesting for me to hear, given how high the morale is for the Ukrainian soldiers. But that just reveals that training enables you to be brave. So it's not just about how well trained they are and so on. It's how intense and ferocious they are in the fighting. And that makes you realize, like, this is American Army, not just through the technology, especially the special force guys. They still is one of the most effective and terrifying armies in the world. And listen, just for context, I'm somebody who is, for the most part, anti-war, a pacifist, but you get to see, some of the realities of war kind of wake you up to what needs to get done to protect sovereignty, to protect some of the values, to protect civilians and homes and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes, war has to happen. And I should also mention on the Russian side, because while I haven't gotten to experience the Russian side yet, I do fully plan to travel to Russia. As I've told everybody, I was very upfront with everybody about this. I would like to hear the story of Russians, but I do know from the Ukrainian side, like the grandmas, I love grandmas. They told me stories that the Russians really, the ones that entered their villages, they really, really believe they're saving Ukraine from Nazis, from Nazi occupation. So they feel that there's the Ukraine is under control of Nazi organizations, and they believe they're saving the country. That's their brothers and sisters. So I think propaganda and I think truth is a very difficult thing to arrive at in that war zone. I think in the 21st century, one of the things you realize that so much of war, even more so than in the past, is an information war. And people that just use Twitter for their source of information might be surprised to know how much misinformation there is on Twitter, like real narratives being sold. And it's really hard to know who to believe. And through all of that, you have to try to keep an open mind and ultimately ignore the powerful and listen to actual citizens, actual people. That's the other maybe obvious lesson, is that war is waged by powerful, rich people, and it's the poor people that suffer. And that's just visible time and time again.
You mentioned the fact that people still enjoy food or the pleasure of cooking, or there's occasional humor or maybe frequent humor. I know Jocko Willink has talked about this in warfare, and all the elements of the human spirit and condition still emerge at various times. I find this amazing, and you and I have had conversations about this before, but the aperture of the mind, the classic story that comes to mind is the one of Viktor Frankl or Nelson Mandela. You put somebody into a small box of confinement, and some people break under those conditions, and other people find entire stories within a centimeter of concrete that can occupy them, and real stories and richness or humor or love or fascination and surprise. And I find this so interesting that the mind is so adaptable. We talked about creature comforts and then lack of creature comforts, and the way that we can adapt. And yet humans are always striving, it seems, or one would hope, for these better conditions, to better their conditions. So as you've come back, and you've been here now back in the States for how long after your trip?
It depends on this podcast release, but it felt like I've never left. So practically speaking, a couple months.
Okay. Yeah, and we won't be shy. We're recording this mid-September. So,
we actually recorded this several years ago. So we're anticipating the future.
This is where we're going to start telling you this is a simulation. You and Joe. I'm still trying to figure out what that actually means. I'd like to take a quick break and acknowledge one of our sponsors, Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens, now called AG1, is a vitamin mineral probiotic drink that covers all of your foundational nutritional needs. I've been taking Athletic Greens since 2012, so I'm delighted that they're sponsoring the podcast. The reason I started taking Athletic Greens, and the reason I still take Athletic Greens once or usually twice a day, is that it gets me the probiotics that I need for gut health. Our gut is very important. It's populated by gut microbiota that communicate with the brain, the immune system, and basically all the biological systems of our body to strongly impact our immediate and long-term health. And those probiotics in Athletic Greens are optimal and vital for microbiotic health. In addition, Athletic Greens contains a number of adaptogens, vitamins, and minerals that make sure that all of my foundational nutritional needs are met, and it tastes great. If you'd like to try Athletic Greens, you can go to athleticgreens.com/Huberman, and they'll give you 5 free travel packs that make it really easy to mix up Athletic Greens while you're on the road, in the car, on the plane, etc. And they'll give you a year's supply of vitamin D3K2. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Huberman to get the 5 free travel packs and the year's supply of vitamin D3K2. I know I speak for many people when I say that we are very happy that you're back. We know that it's not going to be the first and last trip, that there will be others, and that you'll be going to Russia as well, and presumably other places as well, in order to explore. And I have to say, as a podcaster and as your friend, I was really inspired that your sense of adventure, and your sense of not just adventure, but thoughtful, respectful adventure. You understood what you were doing. You weren't just going there to get some wartime footage or something. This wasn't a kick or a thrill. This was really serious and remains serious. So thank you for doing it. And please, next time you go, bring Tim Kennedy again. Or
I feel like Tim Kennedy gets you into we'll take it, because he really loves going to the most dangerous places and helping people. So I think he'd get me into more trouble than it's worth. And I should mention that I mean, there's many reasons I went, but it's definitely not something I take lightly or want to do again.
Right.
So I'm doing things that I don't want to do. I just feel like I have to.
You're compelled.
So I don't think there's now I'll definitely talk about it, as we all should. There's different areas of the world that are seeing a lot of suffering. Yemen, there's so many atrocities going on in the world today, but this one is just personal to me. So I feel like I'm qualified just because of the language. So most of the talking, by the way, I was doing it was in Russian. And so because of the language, because of my history, I felt like I have to do this particular thing. I think it's in many ways stupid and dangerous. And that was made clear to me, but I do many things of this nature because the heart pulls towards that. But also there's a freedom to not, I'm afraid of death, but I think there's a freedom to, it's almost like, okay, if I die, I want to take full advantage of not having a family currently. I feel like when you have a family, there's a responsibility for others. So you immediately become more conservative and careful. I feel like I want to take full advantage of this particular moment in my life when you can be a little bit more accepting of risk. Well,
you should definitely reproduce at some point. Maybe before next time, you should just freeze some sperm.
Really? Is that what you do with the ice bath? Is that how that works?
It's interesting. There's always an opportunity to do some science protocols. That there are products on the internet, and there are actually a few decent manuscripts looking at how cold exposure can increase testosterone levels, but it doesn't happen by the cold directly. Good scientists, as the authors of those papers were and are, realize that it's the vasoconstriction and then the vasodilation. As people warm up again, there's increased blood flow to the testicles. And in women, it seems there's probably increased blood flow to the reproductive organs as well after people warm back up. So that seems to cause some sort of hypernourishment of the various cells, the Sertoli and Leydig cells of the testes that lead to increased output of testosterone, and in women, testosterone as well. So the cold exposure, in any case, is obviously do you do the ice bath? Are you into that?
I've not done that.
As a Russian, you probably consider that a hot tub.
Yeah, exactly. It's a nice thing to have fun with every once in a while, to warm up. No, I haven't done it. I've been kind of waiting to maybe do it together with you at some point.
Great.
Because
we
have a guide.
No, we have one here. It'll be straightforward for you. I always say that the adrenaline comes in waves. And so if you just think about it, walls, like you're going through a number of walls of adrenaline as opposed to going for time, becomes rather trivial. With your jiu-jitsu background and whatnot, you'll immediately recognize the physiological sensation. Even though it's cold specifically, it's the adrenaline that makes you want to hop out of the thing.
And you've seen Joe's. So Joe set up a really nice man cave. Or it's not even a cave because it's so big. It's like a network of man caves, but it has ice bath and a sauna next to each other. So
we have one of those here, ice bath and sauna. So we'll have to get you in it when one of these days, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. No, although there is I don't know the underlying physiological basis, but there does seem to be a trend toward truth telling in the sauna. Some people refer to them as truth barrels. Mine's a barrel sauna shaped like a barrel. Who knows why? Maybe under intense heat duress, people just feel compelled to share.
I have a complicated relationship with saunas because of all the weight cutting.
Oh.
Some of the deepest suffering, sorry to interrupt, I've done was in the sauna. I've gone to some dark places in a sauna because I wrestled my whole life, judo, jiu-jitsu, and those weight cuts can really test the mind. So you're truth telling. Yeah, it's a certain kind of truth telling because you're sitting there and the clock moves slower than it has ever moved in your life. Yeah, so I usually, for the most part, I would try to, have a bunch of sweats, garbage bags, and all that kind of stuff, and run. It's easier because you can distract the mind. In the sauna, you can't distract the mind. It's just you and all the excuses and all the weaknesses in your mind just coming to the surface, and you're just sitting there and sweating or not sweating. That's the worst.
And to talk about visual aperture, you're in a small box, so it also inspires some claustrophobia, even if you're not claustrophobic. Yeah. That's absolutely true. And the desire to just get out of the thing is where you get a pretty serious adrenaline surge from in the sauna as well. Now the sauna actually won't deplete testosterone, but it kills sperm. So for people that sperm are on a 60-day sperm cycle, so if you're trying to donate sperm or because that's what got us onto this, or fertilize an egg or eggs in whatever format, dish or in vivo, as we say in science, which means, well, you can look it up, folks. The 60-day sperm cycle. So if you go into a really hot sauna or a hot bath or a hot tub, in 60 days, those sperm are going to be a significantly greater portion of them will be dead, will be non-viable. So there's a simple solution. People just put an ice pack down there, or a jar, not this jar, but a jar of cold fluid, between their legs, and just sit there, or they go back and forth between the ice bath and the sauna. But you probably, if you're going to go back over there, you should freeze sperm. We're going to do a couple episodes on fertility when it's relatively inexpensive, and you're young, so you should probably do it now, because there is a association with autism as males get older. It's not a strong one. It's significant, but it's still a small contribution to the autism phenotype.
As you age, don't sperm get wiser, or no? There's no science to back that.
No, but men can conceive healthy children at a considerable age. But in any case, but no, they don't get wiser.
It's like
what happens is interesting.
Age steak.
Well, it's a little bit like the maturation of the brain, in the sense that some of the sperm get much better at swimming, and then many of them get less good. Motility is a strong correlate of the DNA of the sperm.
This is probably a good time to announce that I'm selling my sperm as an NFTs. Let's see how much that.
Oh my goodness!
Writing the.
Well, your children, wave. Your future children, and my future children are supposed to do jiu-jitsu together. Yes. Since I've only done the one jiu-jitsu class, so I'm strongly vested in you having children.
Yes.
But only in the friendly kind of way.
Well, yeah, it's the friendly competition kind of way. Yeah.
Right,
dominance of the clan. Yep. For sure.
So moving on to science, but still with our minds in the Ukraine. Did you encounter any scientists or see any universities, or, as we know in this country and in Europe and in elsewhere, science takes infrastructure. You need buildings, you need laboratories, you need robots, you need a lot of equipment, and you need minus 80 freezers, and you need incubators, and you need money, and you need technicians. And typically it's been the wealthier countries that have been able to do more research for sake of research and development of and productization. Certainly the Ukraine had some marvelous universities and marvelous scientists. What's going on with science and scientists over there? And gosh, can we even calculate the loss of discovery that is occurring as a consequence of this conflict?
So science goes on. Before the war, Ukraine had a very vibrant tech sector, which means engineering and all that kind of stuff. In Kiev has a lot of excellent universities, and they still go on. The biggest hit, I would say, is not the infrastructure of the science, but the fact, because of the high morale, everybody is joining the military. So everybody is going to the front to fight, including, you, Andrew Huberman, would be fighting, and not because you have to, but because you want to. And everybody would be really proud that you're fighting. Even though everyone tries to convince, Andrew Huberman, you have much better ways to contribute. There's deep honor in fighting for your country, yes, but there's better ways to contribute to your country than just picking up a gun that you're not that trained with and going to the front. Still, they do it. The scientists, engineers, CEOs, professors, students,
men and
actors, men and women. Obviously, primarily men, but men and women. Like much more than you would see in other militaries. Women are everybody. Everybody wants to fight. Everybody's proud of fighting. There's no discussion of kind of pacifism. Should we be fighting? Is this right? Is this It's everybody's really proud of fighting. So So there's this kind of black hole that pulls everything, all the resource into the war effort. That's not just financial, but also psychological. So it's like, if you're a scientist, it feels like almost like you're dishonoring humanity by continuing to do things you were doing before. There's a lot of people that converted to being soldiers. They literally watch a YouTube video of how to shoot a particular gun, how to arm a drone with a grenade. If you're a tech person, you know how to work with drones. So you're going to use whatever skills you got, figure out whatever skills you got and how to use them to help the effort on the front. And so that's a big hit. But that said, that I've talked to a lot of folks in Kiev, faculty, primarily in the tech economics space. So I didn't get a chance to interact with folks who are on the biology, chemistry, neuroscience side of things. But that still goes on. So one of the really impressive things about Ukraine is that they're able to maintain infrastructure like road, food supply, all that kind of stuff, education, while the war's going on, especially in Kiev. The war started where nobody knew whether Kiev was going to be taken by the Russian forces. It was surrounded. And a lot of experts from outside were convinced that Russia would take Kiev, and they didn't. And one of the really impressive things as a leader, one of the things I really experienced is that a lot of people criticized Zelensky before the war. He only had about like 30% approval rate. A lot of people didn't like Zelensky. But one of the great things he did as a leader, which I'm not sure many leaders would be able to do, is when Kiev was clearly being invaded, he chose to stay in the capital. Everybody, all the American military, the intelligence agencies, NATO, his own staff, advisors, all told him to flee, and he stayed. And so I think that was a beacon, a symbol for the rest, for the universities, for science, for the infrastructure that we're staying to. And that kept the whole thing going. There's an interesting social experiment that happened. I think for folks who are interested in sort of gun control in this country in particular, is one of the decisions they made early on is to give guns to everybody, semi-automatics.
Early on in the war?
Early on in the war,
okay.
Yeah. So everybody got a gun. They also released a bunch of prisoners from prison because there was no staff to keep the prisons running. And so there's a very interesting psychological experiment of like, how is this going to go? Everybody has a gun. Are they going to start robbing places? Are they going to start taking advantage of a chaotic situation? And what happened is that crime went to zero. So it turned out that this, as an experiment, worked wonderfully.
That's a case where love generalized.
Yes.
Or at least hate did not. We don't know if it's love or it's sort of lack of initiative for common culture directed hate.
Yeah, right. I think that's very correct to say that it wasn't hate that was unifying people. It was love of country, love of community. It's probably the same thing that will happen to humans when like aliens invade. It's the common effort. Everybody puts everything else to the side. Plus, just the sheer amount of guns. It's similar to like Texas. You realize like, well, there's going to be a self-correcting mechanism very quickly because the rule of law was also put aside, right? Like, basically the police force lost a lot of power because everybody else has guns and they're kind of taking the law into their own hands. And that system, at least in this particular case, in this particular moment in human history, worked. It's an interesting lesson,
Mm-hmm. It is. I had an interesting contrast that I'll share with you. Because you mentioned Texas. So not so long ago, I was in Austin. I often visit you or others in Austin, as you know. And many doors that I walked past, including a school, said no firearms past this point. As a sticker on the door. You see this on hospitals sometimes. I saw this at Baylor College of Medicine, et cetera. Relatively common to see in Texas. Not so common in California. And then I flew to the San Francisco Bay Area. I was walking by an elementary school in my old neighborhood and saw a similar sticker and looked at it, and it said, no peanuts or other allergy-containing foods past this point on the door of this elementary school. So quite a different contrast, guns and peanuts. Now, peanut allergies obviously are very serious for some people, although there's great research out of Stanford showing that early exposure to peanuts can prevent the allergies. But don't start rubbing yourself in peanut butter, folks, if you have a peanut allergy. That's not the best way to deal with it. In any case, the contrast of what's dangerous, the contrast of, the familiarity with guns versus no familiarity, and Israel and elsewhere, you see machine guns in the airport. In Germany, Frankfurt, you see machine guns in the airport. Not so common in the United States. So again, I feel like there's this aperture of vision, there's this aperture of pleasures and versus creature comforts and lack of creature comforts. And then there's this aperture of danger, right? People who are familiar with guns, are familiar with people coming in and setting their firearm on the table and eating dinner, but if you're not accustomed to that, it's jarring, right?
I should mention, people know this throughout human history, but the human ability to get get used to violence is incredible. So like you could be living in a peaceful time like we're here now, and there will be one explosion, like a 9/11 type of situation. That'd be a huge shock, terrifying. Everybody freaks out. The second one is a huge drop off in how freaked out you get, and in a matter of days, sometimes hours, it becomes the normal. I've talked to so many people in Kharkiv, which is one of the towns that's seen a lot of heated battle. You ask them, is it safe there? In fact, when I went to the closer and closer to the war zone, you ask people, is it safe? And their answer is usually, yeah, it's pretty safe.
It's all signal to noise.
Yeah, nobody has told me, except like Western reporters sitting in the west side of Ukraine, it's really dangerous here. Everyone's like, yeah, it's good. Like my uncle just died yesterday. Like he was shot. But it's pretty, it's pretty good. Like the farm's still running. Like they how do I put it? They focus on the positive. That's one, but there's a deeper truth there, which is you just get used to difficult situations, and the stuff that make you happy and the stuff that make you upset is relative to that new normal that you establish.
Well, I grew up in California, and there were a lot of earthquakes. I remember the '89 quake. I remember the Embarcadero Freeway pancaking on top of people and cars. I remember I moved to Southern California. There was a Northridge quake. Wherever I moved, there seemed to be earthquakes. I never worry about earthquakes, ever. I just don't. In fact, I don't like the destruction they cause, but every once in a while, an earthquake will roll through, and it's kind of exciting. It sounds like a train coming through. It's like, wow, like the earth is moving, Again, I don't want anyone to get harmed, but I enjoy a good rumble coming through nonetheless. It's signal to noise. Yeah. But if I saw a tornado, I'd freak out. And people from the Midwest are probably comfortable with, Dan Gable, the great wrestler from the Midwest, and I've never met, but I have great respect for. He's probably, sees a tornado, is like, yeah, maybe, So I think signal to noise is real. Before I neglect, although I won't forget, speaking of signal to noise and environment, you are returning to or have gone back to one of your original natural habitats, which is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is it's actually difficult to pronounce in full, MIT, right? So you've been spending some time there teaching and doing other things. Tell us what you're up to with MIT recently.
Well, I'm really glad that you, being on the West Coast, know the difference between like Boston, New York. I feel like a lot of people think it's like the East Coast. No,
it's very different, especially to Bostonians and New Yorkers.
They get very aggressive.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, I love it. I gave lectures there in front of an in-person crowd.
What were you talking about?
For the AI, so different aspects of AI, and robotics, machine learning. So for people who know the artificial intelligence field, they usually don't use the term AI, and people from outside use AIs. The biggest breakthroughs in the machine learning field was some discussion of robotics and so on. Yeah, it was in person. It was wonderful. I'm a sucker for that. I really avoided teaching or any kind of interaction during COVID because people put a lot of emphasis on, but also got comfortable with remote teaching. And I think nobody enjoyed it, except sort of there's a notion that it's much easier to do because you don't have to, you don't have to travel, you can do it out in your pajamas kind of thing. But when you actually get to do it, you don't get the same kind of joy that you do when you're teaching. As a student, you don't get the same kind of joy of learning. It's not as effective and all that kind of stuff. So to be in person together with people, to see their eyes, to get their excitement, to get the questions and all the interactions, it was awesome. And I'm still a sucker and a believer in the the ideal of MIT, of the university. I think it's an incredible place. There's something in the air still, but it really hit, the pandemic hit universities hard because, and I can say this is not you saying it, this is me saying it, that administrations, as in all cases when people criticize institutions, the pandemic has given more power to the administration and taken away power from the faculty and the students. And that's from everybody involved, including the administration, that's a concern because the university is about the teachers and the students.
And I think as much as there are detractors out there, or people that try, right? I mean, it's pretty, whatever they're doing is pretty feeble in my mind. I mean, it's like cap gun fire,
Yes.
if that.
Very feeble.
So many of us, men and women, old and young, hear something and feel something in your message. Like, yeah, like it seems kind of crazy. Gosh, like, doesn't he ever just relax? What about his sleep?
Yep,
look at his feet. He's gonna injure himself. I've heard, listen, I'll be very direct. I got friends who are in the teams who just go, yeah, what's he gonna do when he can't run? And I know the answer is keep running.
That's right.
Right. But it's more comfortable for people, even high achievers.
Especially high achievers.
To believe that if you took one thing away, that it would all go away. It's absolutely clear that's not the case with you. I'm 100% convinced. I just know that because what we're talking about is this.
You know how many times I haven't been able to run? 2 heart surgeries, multiple knee surgeries, and after every knee surgery, they say you're not going to run again. And I'm fine with that. There's no running up here, bro. None. This was what it was all about. That's what they lost. What if you can't run? Give a fuck. It was never about running. Why do you think I run? It's the worst thing. I hate doing it more than anything. Hence the willpower.
Right. Your anterior mid-cingulate cortex
Hence the willpower.
would start to regress if you loved running.
Think about it. Every day I wake up, I don't just run a mile, 2 miles. It's the one thing I hate the most to do, and I do it like I love it. 250, 60, 70, 300-mile runs at one time, no sleep. And every step, when I get to think about this, I get to the fucking start line, cussing at Jennifer. Why the fuck am I here? I hate this shit. After 70 some hours of running, every fucking question I ever had is answered. Every question I had is answered. I cap success. People go, what do you mean you cap success? For me to be who I am, so when I go smoke jump, I'm smoke jump 3 to 4 months out of the year, sometimes 5.
Could you, just for those that aren't educated about, just like give us a brief description of what smoke jumping entails?
So basically, you jump into fires, not into them, but you jump by fires that people can't get to.
So out of planes and helicopters.
Right, out of planes,
fast lines.
parachute. Yeah. It's all parachuting. Mm-hmm. So you parachute out of airplanes and then you fight the fire. You and sometimes 4 other guys or maybe 8 other guys and gals, and you're putting this fire out. So I lose millions of dollars every summer to do this. It blows people's minds. Why the hell are you doing this?
And you're breathing soot.
I'm breathing soot, knees are jacked up, hitting the ground, hurting, whatever. Talking to normal people, they'll never get it, so I don't even explain it to them. But this is why I call cap success. I'm talking financial success. For me to continue having that willpower, the second I just become a speaking monkey and travel around and speaking gigs 12 months out of the year, put camps on, do this, put on lectures, get supplement lines and do this and write more books and shit, I've ruined the exact thing I worked on my entire life. And while I didn't know it until today, but something always told me, this is a very, very, very perishable skill, this willpower that you have, because I do have a willpower that I have never seen in anybody in my life. It is a haunting force that just keeps me going. And I know that that is my strength. If you have that, so that's worth every dime I've ever made in my life, is the fact that I can look a man in the eye finally and have a real conversation without going like this. because I'm lying or I'm a piece of shit or I know, you know how a person, and so many people do this shit. They're talking to you on who they want to be. They're lying to you. And they walk away. I've done it so many times. You walk away like, God, man, why can't I just tell him the truth? Why the hell can I just tell him the truth? You know how good it feels for me now to look at you in your eye and every man I see. Because women won't get this. Women will not get this. Man to man, that man shit. When you look another man in the eye and you know that everything you're fucking saying is real and it comes from a real working place, something that you earned. It's the best feeling in the world.
You can say that actually happened.
Yes.
Like I know with certainty what I'm saying actually happened.
Actually happened. Who I am and who I say I am, I am. No more lies. No more skirting the truth. No more bullshit. And that is worth every dime I've ever made in my life. And I swear to God on that. Every dime I've ever made in my life, building who I built, so I cap success because I know that if I ever go 12 months out of the year and don't put every day I'm going at it, but several months out of the year, I go right back to ground zero, which means I'm just fucking David Goggins. No Goggins, no carry boats, fucking logs bullshit. It's just pick up that fucking Pulaski and dig. Hey, get that fucking pump, walk down a mile, put it in the fucking water, mosquitoes beating. You're just David Goggins. You're nobody. Because that's where my growth is. That's where my willpower comes from. And that's where it stays. That's why when I talk to you now, and can't I talk like this, dude? People don't talk with this kind of passion because it ain't there. It ain't there. They're regurgitating some shit from 30 fucking years ago. I'm regurgitating shit from an hour ago. Hour ago. Come on, man. It's just be real. And I can't be on these podcasts. I can't talk to anybody without being real. I'll go away. I'll just go away. Because I can't give you what I want to give you.
You said perishable skill. I think that's another set of words I want to highlight because skill implies behavior. And when we were just talking a second ago about the deep, true bedrock sense of confidence that comes from looking someone in the eye and telling somebody something that you absolutely know it's true because it happened. You're talking about actions. You're not talking about perceptions. You're not talking about what you believe happened. You know it happened. And there's something really concrete about actions. I mean, that's what's so interesting is we're talking about the mind, but actions are the manifestation of the mind. And the stuff that just stays in here, people die with that. It doesn't go anywhere. I long ago, somebody said, I forget what the context was. It was a neuroscientist. He said, most emotions, like they're just emotions. They're just in there. Like you don't have to do anything with them. Mm-hmm. And I think certain emotions you want to do something with. Right. But I think people forget this. They feel miserable, like they're going to dissolve into a puddle of their own tears. No one ever died from an emotion. Right. But they feel like they overwhelm us as if it's a tidal wave. It's going to pull us under and drown us. It's so interesting to me because I think you have a gravitational pull. People can feel the energy. I think, yes, you're either completely, badly, or partially understood. There's only one guy on the planet that truly understands you. I think there's one woman, Jennifer, who probably understands you as much as anyone's going to. And then the rest of us are kind of grasping, trying to figure it out. Right. But you're saying go inward. Mm-hmm. So first go inward, mm-hmm. and then it's actions. Inward and actions. Now, the inward piece is something I'd like to just spend a little bit of time on mm-hmm. because there are a couple characters from history, people that were in concentration camps. Nelson Mandela. I mean, I'm not sure he had Instagram in there. I'm pretty sure he didn't. Right. And I don't think there was anyone coaching him on like, hey, you're going to get out someday and actually you're going to lead an entire country. I'm pretty sure that's not how it worked. Mm-hmm. He had to find it here. Mm-hmm. He had to find it between his ears. Right. And there are other examples, but that's an important one. So the process of going inward, does it for you, and here I will ask for suggestions, because I think there are those of us who want to build this skill. Right. Wall yourself off, phone mm-hmm. off for big portions of the day perhaps. Mm-hmm. Texting off, the requests, the this, the that, Anyone that knows you knows that we've communicated a few texts, but most of it comes through a filter. She's great. She knows you, and she knows how to protect your time.
And that hurts people's feelings. People get mad about that.
Hey, God bless you, Jennifer. Cutting oneself off. When you're in there, you say it's just you. And the voice